Wait, they're using those ancient things? Commander Rock stared at the screen, his green-tinted eyes widening. That can't be right. Those are... What do the humans call them? Ballistics? His lieutenant nodded, clearly just as puzzled. Yes, sir. They're essentially slugs of metal fired at high speeds using explosive powder. Primitive technology. Absolutely no finesse or elegance, and it's devastatingly effective against our shields. Rock's disbelief turned to frustration. We spent billions perfecting our shield technology, calibrating them to resist plasma bursts, particle beams, and gravitational pulses, and these humans show up with something straight out of their own history books. This is ridiculous. From the bridge of their cruiser, the screen showed distant flashes of light where battle had broken out. The Allied fleets of the Zaral Dominion had dominated every opponent they'd encountered. Their weapon systems were sophisticated and elegant, a testament to their high-tech culture. Plasma beams glided effortlessly across space, leaving glowing trails in the darkness, and ships could destroy an opponent without even closing half the distance. And yet, here they were, watching as human forces launched projectiles that seemed almost laughably outdated. "Perhaps, sir," the lieutenant ventured, "it's a desperate measure. They can't possibly expect those weapons to carry them through the entire conflict." Commander Rock narrowed his eyes, studying the tactical readouts. Desperation or not, they're holding their ground. More than that, they're gaining ground. The humans' fleet, though smaller and less imposing than the Zaral ships, moved with frightening efficiency. Their weapons, though limited in range, were relentless. Instead of dissipating harmlessly against the advanced shielding, each round hammered through, wearing down barriers in mere moments. The Zaral shields were like tissue paper against the humans' relentless assault. Rock couldn't understand it. The human ships looked like they'd been patched together from spare parts. Some of them even had obvious signs of structural wear, as if they'd been scavenged and reused a dozen times over. Yet they maneuvered in tight formations, working as a unit with precision that unnerved him. "Bring up the feed from the forward recon ship," Rock ordered. The view flickered, zooming in on the lead human vessel. Its hull was scarred, and its design was a mishmash of angular metal plates, clearly designed for function over form. Small hatches opened up along the sides, and turrets swung around, aiming toward the Zaral line. Then Rock saw something that nearly made him burst into laughter. "What are they firing? Projectiles out of tubes?" Rock asked, looking at his officers as though he were the butt of some cosmic joke. One of the senior tacticians turned to him, his expression a mix of awe and discomfort. "Sir, those are kinetic weapons. The humans call them rail guns. They accelerate a solid metal slug using electromagnetic force. And it's powerful, powerful." Rock scoffed. "Our shields are impenetrable to energy-based weaponry. These bits of metal can't be doing anything significant." The tactical officer cleared his throat. "Respectfully, sir, they are. Each of those slugs is tearing straight through our shields. They're so dense they're bypassing the energy barriers as though they weren't even there. We're losing ships." Commander Rock clenched his jaw, refusing to accept what he was hearing. They were the Zaral Dominion, conquerors of entire systems, and yet here they were, struggling against a species that still used primitive projectiles. "Fire up the plasma cannons and concentrate on the human lead ship. They're clinging to relics of the past, so we'll crush them with our superiority." Rock's command echoed through the ship, and within seconds the cruiser's plasma cannons hummed to life, targeting the human vessel. The humans seemed to sense the build-up, and the lead ship angled sharply, moving out of the plasma cannon's line of fire. Rock watched, half admiring, as the humans avoided the blast with a precision that was unnervingly sharp. "How are they—" Rock cut himself off, feeling a flicker of concern. He hadn't expected them to be able to outmaneuver plasma blasts so effectively. He refocused, his mind racing. They're relying on speed and brute force. They can't keep this up. Their weapons must be limited in supply. They'll have to reload soon, and that's when we strike. The lieutenant nodded, confident in his commander's assessment. The Zaral fleet repositioned, closing the gaps to trap the humans between them. Plasma beams lanced out, and for a moment it looked as if they'd finally cornered their prey. Then, unexpectedly, the human fleet adjusted again, moving in closer. Rock frowned. What are they doing? They're moving into close quarters. They'll be vulnerable to our secondary cannons. But as the human ships approached, they unleashed another barrage. Rock watched as smaller rounds peppered their hulls, followed by larger projectiles, each one tearing through shields like paper. "Sir," the tactical officer said, his voice barely above a whisper, "they're bypassing our defenses completely. Every time we adapt, they shift tactics. It's as though they're predicting our movements before we make them." "Impossible," Rock snarled. "They're primitive. We have the most advanced tactics, the most sophisticated technology. They're just lucky." But he didn't believe his own words. As another Zaral ship erupted in flames, he realized that luck had nothing to do with it. The humans were relentless, adaptable and unyielding. Their weapons, outdated or not, were tearing through Zaral forces with disturbing ease. A new warning flashed on Rock's screen. "Hull breach on decks 5 through 7. "Sir, structural integrity compromised." "How?" Rock barked, feeling his composure fray. "These are solid chunks of metal, not energy fields. They're not supposed to be able to penetrate." The lieutenant, his voice tense, replied, "It's the kinetic energy, sir. The humans are propelling those slugs with such force that they cut through the ship as if it were nothing, and they're targeting critical systems. It's like they know exactly where to strike." Rock's scales prickled as he processed the words. In all his years of battle, he'd never encountered a species like this. They were using relics of an ancient era, weapons that shouldn't have stood a chance against Zaral technology. And yet, here they were, facing an opponent who seemed almost custom-built to shatter every expectation he held about warfare. The humans had managed to bridge an impossible gap, blending archaic weaponry with a frightening mastery of tactics. Rock's mind raced. He had to figure out a counter-strategy, something that would give them an edge before more ships fell. But every time he thought he'd found a weakness, the humans closed the gap, adapting before he could act. He had the uneasy sense that the humans had been preparing for this exact scenario all along. They turned every disadvantage into an advantage, using their seemingly outdated technology with deadly precision. And as the ships continued to explode around him, Commander Rock understood something chilling. Commander Rock gripped the edge of his console, claws scraping against the metal. His mind spun through scenarios, each one ending with the same grim reality. Their shields were useless. The humans' blunt, brutal projectiles defied every precaution the Zaral Dominion had taken. It was like watching ants tear apart a beast with endless bites, slow but inevitable. "Sir," the lieutenant said, snapping Rock from his thoughts, "we've detected a shift in their fleet. They're grouping into 2 separate formations, flanking us from the sides." "Trying to box us in," Rock muttered. His frustration bubbled up again, but he tamped it down, forcing himself to think clearly. "Good. Let them try. Prepare our short-range disruptors. If they want to close in, we'll fry their systems from within." The Zaral ships activated their disruptors, emitting waves meant to scramble electronics and disable enemy navigation. In previous encounters, these pulses had been devastating to any fleet that ventured too close, leaving ships stranded and vulnerable. But as the disruptor waves rolled out, the human ships pressed forward, undeterred. Rock's screens showed the projectiles they were firing, bristling, ugly weapons that smashed through space with sheer speed and density, and the human strategy. It was audaciously reckless. They had chosen to abandon any concept of self-preservation, charging into the disruptor fields as if they didn't care about the consequences. "They're pushing through our disruptors," the tactical officer said, awe creeping into his voice. "Their ships should be malfunctioning, their systems failing, but they're still charging forward, sir," Rock snarled. "How are they doing this? Disruptor waves should render any fleet useless in close proximity. We believe, Commander," another officer began, "that these humans, they're relying on analog systems." The word felt alien on Rock's tongue. "Analog? You mean mechanical systems?" It was almost laughable. The Zaral fleet was equipped with state-of-the-art, interlinked quantum systems, capable of instantaneous responses and adjustments. The humans were using old-fashioned gears, levers, and circuitry in what appeared to be warships built by hand. "It's crude but effective, sir," the officer replied. "The disruptors don't affect them the same way. The humans seem to have learned long ago that relying too much on digital or energy-dependent tech makes them vulnerable." Rock seethed as he watched the human ships maneuvering with shocking precision, closing the distance with ease. They'd somehow anticipated every one of the Zaral's technological advantages. Each one had been circumvented, as if the humans had prepared for this exact moment. "They're not just relying on old tech," Rock muttered, mostly to himself. "They're using it against us." The realization was a bitter one. Where the Zaral had assumed they were innovating, the humans had quietly fortified. They turned their limitations into a strength, taking what the Zaral considered archaic and making it deadly. "They're within range of our primary turrets," the lieutenant announced. "Should we engage?" "Yes. Target the lead ships." Rock had no choice. The disruptors were failing, and the only option was to meet them in battle directly. He'd underestimated them once. He wouldn't make the same mistake again. The primary cannons unleashed a torrent of energy, plasma beams lancing through the void, homing in on the human ships. Several were caught in the initial blast, and Rock felt a brief satisfaction as he saw hulls ignite and ships veer off course. But then, just as quickly, the humans regrouped. One by one, their ships fell back, circling to form a tighter formation that Rock recognized immediately. It was a defensive shield tactic, a formation that allowed each ship to cover the others. A move used for conserving forces. "They're retreating," Rock wondered aloud. He felt a glimmer of hope. Yes, that's it. They're out of ammunition. They're forced to fall back. But even as he spoke, a shiver ran through him. He knew deep down that the humans weren't retreating in panic. No, this was something else. They were gathering, pulling back to regroup. They were thinking, planning, and worse yet, they seemed to have a purpose. "Commander," one of the tactical officers reported, his voice shaky, "we've picked up encrypted signals within their fleet. They're coordinating an attack, sir, and it's unconventional." "What do you mean by that?" Rock demanded. "Sir, they're transmitting audio signals, human voices across the fleet. There's no discernible language, no digital coding. It's like they're using speech alone, sending commands verbally rather than relying on a network system." Rock's brow furrowed. Speech-based communication? In the heat of battle, how crude can they get? The Zaral relied on instant data exchanges, neural interfaces, and quantum-linked processors. Speech was outdated, slow, imprecise. Yet it was somehow working. The humans were adapting, maneuvering, and reorganizing in real time. "Commander, they're moving again!" the lieutenant shouted, snapping Rock from his analysis. The humans had regrouped and were advancing once more, each ship falling into line with mechanical precision. Their paths converged into a single, unbreakable line. "Launch torpedoes," Rock ordered. "Intercept them before they get within striking range." The torpedoes blasted from their launch tubes, cutting across the void toward the advancing human fleet. But as they neared, the humans shifted, splitting into smaller groups that darted around the oncoming torpedoes. The humans had anticipated the attack, each ship weaving in coordination, dodging with an agility that Rock would never have expected from such primitive vessels. They were using every ounce of skill, every moment of coordination, to evade each Zaral attack. As they closed in, Rock realized with a pang of dread that the humans were moving with a purpose beyond mere survival. They were pressing forward, pushing closer, as if preparing for a final move. "Prepare the remaining disruptors and lock onto their main formation," Rock shouted, his voice cracking under the strain. He couldn't afford another miscalculation. "Deploy every defensive unit we have. We cannot allow them to close the gap." The remaining Zaral forces scrambled, deploying mines and small drones, attempting to create a web of defensive measures between them and the approaching humans. But as the alien drones moved to intercept, the human ships surged forward, each one deftly evading, weaving through the scattered defenses. Rock could feel the tension thickening on the bridge. The humans were closing the gap at an alarming rate, their line unbroken. The Zaral's advanced weaponry, designed for long-range superiority, was useless at close quarters. And that's exactly where the humans were forcing them to fight. With every passing moment, the humans drew closer, their weapons primed, their ships relentless. "Commander," the tactical officer murmured, a new fear in his eyes. "At this rate, they'll be within our minimum safe distance in less than a minute." Rock's stomach twisted. The humans had predicted their every countermeasure, every strength and every weakness. They weren't just fighting, they were studying, adapting, transforming with each skirmish. "Hold the line," Rock ordered, his voice carrying a note of desperation. His mind raced, searching for a final strategy, any last maneuver that could turn the tide. But he knew deep down that the humans had already seen through his plan. Their path was set on a single goal. The gap between the Zaral cruiser and the human fleet closed rapidly. Commander Rock's every instinct screamed at him to pull back, to retreat and regroup, but his pride wouldn't allow it. They were the Zaral Dominion, conquerors of worlds. They couldn't back down to a species clinging to primitive weaponry. Yet, as the humans neared, Rock felt a growing sense of inevitability. The humans weren't stopping. "Prepare to engage at close range," Rock barked. "If they want to make this personal, then so be it." The bridge crew scrambled, shifting the cruiser's systems to engage in close-quarters combat. The Zaral weapons, designed for elegant long-range annihilation, were clunky and imprecise at such a short distance. But there was no other choice now. The first human ship struck, slamming into the Zaral defenses with devastating force. Metal impacted metal, and Rock's cruiser shuddered violently. Through the view screen, Rock saw the humans firing relentlessly, each railgun blast punching through shields and armor with mechanical brutality. They didn't rely on speed or stealth, but on sheer persistence. It was as if they had accepted casualties as a natural part of their attack, and their comrades pushed forward with grim focus. In the chaos, Rock spotted the lead human vessel, a massive, ugly ship with a hull battered from countless battles, yet it advanced, defying every blast thrown its way. The humans fired wave after wave of slugs, relentless. Each shot was designed to... They didn't hesitate, didn't falter, and every move seemed calculated to exploit Zaral weaknesses. "Sir, the hull integrity is failing on decks 2 and 3, shouted the lieutenant. Rock gritted his teeth, watching as his carefully crafted defenses crumbled. "Redirect all energy to the core defenses. We need to withstand this assault until we can counterattack." But there was no time. The humans had breached the outer hull, and their ships closed in, circling like predators. Rock could see their crews now through magnified screens, faces determined, hardened by experience. They were fierce, disciplined, and entirely focused on their target. Suddenly, the comms flickered. A human face filled the screen, one of their commanders, eyes steady and cold. "To Commander Rock of the Zaral Dominion," the human spoke, his voice calm yet firm. "Your forces have fought bravely, but your technology, your tactics, they're all built on an illusion of invincibility. You never anticipated meeting an opponent who could adapt, who could endure." Rock clenched his fists. "You underestimate us, human. The Zaral have conquered entire systems. You are nothing but a temporary inconvenience." The human commander's eyes narrowed, unimpressed. "We're more than an inconvenience, Commander. We're humanity. We don't conquer. We survive, we adapt, and we overcome. That's our strength." With that, the transmission cut, and Rock's ship was struck by a final, devastating barrage. The bridge erupted with alarms, and the entire cruiser groaned as bulkheads crumpled under the assault. Systems shorted, screens went dark, and smoke filled the air. The crew scrambled to hold their positions, but the battle was lost. As the bridge lights flickered out, Rock's final thought was a reluctant admiration for these strange creatures. They'd shown a resilience that defied all reason, using outdated technology not as a handicap, but as a weapon against the Zaral's overconfidence. Humans weren't hindered by their primitiveness. In fact, they had weaponized it, transforming it into an unexpected advantage. The last thing Rock saw was the human fleet, its battered ships still advancing, relentless as ever.